the final day of the week. These are the voyages of the program Unsportsmanlike Conduct. Its ongoing mission to explore strange new movies, to seek out new bits and new edifications, to boldly go where no radio program has gone before. Oh, Camp's Movie Club. It's El Camp's Movie Club. El Camp's Movie Club. It's El Camp's Movie Club.
With the man himself, Kent Wolgamont of the Lincoln Journal-Star. You know it's not Friday. It's not the final day of the week. But
man,
This is going to screw me up.
Oh, it really is.
I know.
Oh, One Beer Friday time.
it's going to mess me up too. But we had some scheduling issues, and we wanted to make sure we got in this week because Josh went old school, and I mean old school with this week's film as we go back to 1941. This thing will be 80 years old next week, Kent. Citizen Kane.
Absolutely. I want to hear what you guys thought, and then we'll throw in some other things. But this is considered the AFI, American Film Institute, top 100 films of all time list, number 1. BFI, the British Film Institute, top 100 films of all time, number 1. So that's a critic's viewpoint, more or less. But
Right.
let's talk.
Well, it's interesting. I'm the only one outside of you, Kent, that has seen it before, but it had been 30 years. I saw it in a high school.
Oh, wow.
A high school class. Can't remember which class it was. And I'm glad I got a chance to rewatch it because outside of obviously the big picture stuff, and just to be fair, and I know it's a 79-year-old movie,
Yeah, spoiler alert.
there is a, it's not a shocking ending, but it's an aha ending.
Mhm.
So we won't spoil that, even though I know it's been out there.
But I think we have to because we got to talk. I think we have to talk about.
I think
that.
we can.
Yeah.
You think?
I think we
Johnson,
can, mainly because me and Josh talked about this yesterday. When he picked this, I knew it's impossible to not know about that. I feel like if you're even somewhat invested in
you might
pop
be right
culture or
because there's
television.
been enough, commentary. But either way,
Well, there's also been enough parodies of that.
Sure.
Exactly. Yeah.
Sure.
But my overall point was that there wasn't a lot of detail I remembered about the movie. I just remembered the very broad strokes about the movie. And so I'm glad I got a chance to rewatch it because the storytelling is top notch.
Yeah.
And when they talk about movies being ahead of their time, I think this movie exemplifies that. I was watching it last night. First of all, 2 hours flew by. It's a 2-hour film. It went fast.
Yep.
And a lot of that has to do with, they're constantly bouncing back and forth into different times in Charles Foster Kane, who is the central character, his timeline. And I just think there's just so much about it in terms of the way it's shot, the way it's written, the way it was directed, the way it was acted. Most of the actors here were unknown people. Orson Welles was the most well-known, and that was only because of what he had done on the radio. But everybody else,
many of those people with him from the radio. Right.
Many of the everybody else was brand new. In fact, in the closing credits, they kind of go out of their way to say, this is a big film debut for all of these
introducing all these people. It was cool.
Exactly. Yeah. So from just a technical standpoint, a storytelling standpoint, this movie truly does stand the test of time. And as I kind of teased last week, Josh, it's a very convenient pick based on the news of today.
Oh, yeah.
Because the central figure, Charles Foster Kane, is a newspaper magnate who was involved in a lot of what they called back then yellow journalism, which was, journalism on the fringes of the truth, but it was sensationalized.
Yeah, what was the
And of
line
course-
early in the movie? It's like, we make the headline bigger or whatever, and thus the story is going to get bigger.
Yeah. And of course, the bragging about how basically it was us that started the Spanish-American War. And a lot of this is kind of based in reality because it was believed that the big newspapers of the day back then were really more responsible for starting the war, the Spanish-American War, than actual relations between the two countries. So, there's a lot of things that tie back into today in terms of so-called fake news or, people becoming so big, celebrity politicians. So it really works out well, and it's a perfectly timed selection, I thought.
Yeah, I loved it. So a little background, and so the spoiler we were talking about mentioned is going to be Rosebud. So Kent, I did not remember I've never seen Casablanca either, and I plan on watching that at some point very soon. But I knew about Rosebud. I just for some reason I thought that was in Casablanca. And so when Steve mentioned on Monday, he's like, "Yeah, I watched it." And I go, "Oh, how was it?" And he goes, "I really liked it." And he mentioned there's one thing in there that I knew about, and I wish I wouldn't have. And I go, "Oh, is this Rosebud?" And he goes, "Yes." And I was like, "Damn it," because I knew about that too, because it's hard to just exist in humanity.
And as much as, and I think
it.
like you, like I knew about it as far as I've seen like the parodies, like you said, Kent, of the very first scene.
Mm-hmm.
And then I knew what Rosebud was
me too.
From the parodies or from whatever other, pop culture stuff I had seen it from. But I didn't understand never seen it. So I didn't understand why that was relevant, what was going on. And even though it was kind of the central kind of thing that kept bringing all these times back and forth because they were trying to figure out what that was, it didn't really ruin much of the story. Like you said, John, it wasn't really this like big twist ending. It was just this like, that's kind of cute. That's really the only feeling that I missed out on, which really didn't have an effect on what happened throughout the movie.
And one more thing, Ken, before you get going on this, I always remembered hearing about that, and it's like, it's a sled? Like, that's pretty dumb.
Mhm.
And then you watch it, and it's like, oh, okay, never mind.
Makes total sense.
It makes total sense.
And you see, and again, a lot of the detail of the movie I had forgotten in 30 years, but the movie opens with young Charles Foster Kane sledding.
Yep.
On the day that he basically leaves his home to be
taken away from his parents.
Gets taken away from his parents as part of a deal to educate him while his mom is making, millions off of this gold mine. So it as soon as I saw that opening scene, that was like, boom, okay, now I get why this was such a big deal to him. I hadn't remembered that part. So just a lot about this film. By the way, if you ever wanted to read something about this, has to be the biggest Wikipedia page.
Oh, it's huge.
Dedicated to the film. I mean, it goes over everything about this film, from the sound, from the technical direction, from the fighting over his contract, Orson Welles' contract. There's really a lot to chew on when you study this film.
Ken, I kind of want to ask you, now that we're going to kick it off to you to get your thoughts and stuff, to start that off, like you mentioned, this is widely known as the best movie ever. And it's not that I don't necessarily agree with that, but is a lot of that even still today because of just the groundbreaking nature of the movie when it came out? And does it get a lot of deserved credit for a ton of these firsts? And like, what, was it one of the first to kind of go back and forth in time?
Yeah,
like
what did it do that no movies had done at that point?
The shots, I think, are always one that I noticed that were different. Like his camera work and his screen the camera work and the shots of everything is something that you didn't see back then. And the way that he did like scenes, it wasn't just two people talking in a room. He'd move the camera around and he'd put it down or above. That stuff I noticed is that kind of, and the storytelling is phenomenal. So add that on to all of this groundbreaking stuff. Is that kind of the reason why?
Yes. Kind of go through this in some sort of order. First off, a lot of this stuff wasn't the very first time it was ever done. A lot of those sort of innovative camera angles, like shooting at the ceiling and all of that, were done in German expressionist filmmaking in the 1920s. He brought that to the mainstream, okay?
Mm-hmm.
To where it was broadly seen. The second thing that goes into this is the way that he told the story in the series of flashbacks, but also the unreliable narrator aspect of it. You don't know if these old people that the reporter is talking to actually remember what happened or if they're kind of making up what happened, right? That's called unreliable narrator. That comes out of literature. That innovative, right? Rarely, if ever, had been done before. Overlapping dialogue. There are scenes in which two people are talking at the same time. This may be the first time that ever was done, right? Because that's how reality is. He brought that in from radio. You guys know what it's like, It worked better when you got some overlap, right?
Yep.
Well, he brought that in from his radio experience, right? With the Mercury Theater and, War of the Worlds and all of that. Then I believe it's Godard, the French filmmaker, said that Wells was the first person that figured out how to use sound in a movie effectively, including score and dialogue and special effects sound and all of that. So there's that. Then you have Bernard Herrmann's score, which made him the in-demand movie score guy for 40 years, carries the film. You put all of those things together. I left out something. That light and dark, two things about the cinematography. You have what they call chiaroscuro lighting, and this is art history talk here. It really was started, that sort of lighting idea comes out of paintings like by Caravaggio from right after the Renaissance. And it's where it's really bright in some place and really dark elsewhere, right? But okay, you got a lot of that. You didn't see that. And then deep focus is what they call it, when everything's in focus from the foreground all the way to the background.
Meant to ask you about, there was a couple instances that I noticed that in particular, and I wonder if this was the first time that had happened.
Once again, it may not have been the first time, but it was by far the best usage of it up to that time and the most extensive. And he brought all of those things together and then on top of it told a hell of a story. Okay. Sure. Yeah. You could take all those technical aspects and put it together, but without the story, you don't have anything.
I like you mentioned the sound, because that is, I went to school for audio engineering and sound, and I had a couple classes about like post-production and film, so I know a little bit about like what they do now as far as the sound that goes into a movie. And basically every piece of dialogue you hear in any movie right now has been redubbed over the actual on-set sound. And so something I noticed in a movie so old, like right away, was I was having to play with my volume constantly because there'd be a scene with two people right in front of you having a conversation, and then there'd be a scene of like a whole bunch of guys way far away from the camera, and it was very noticeable that they were a lot harder to hear and understand. And then, like you said about the score, that was something I noticed too, was like just the perfect moments of like in a lot of movies now, you don't really notice it. It's used to get a feeling and to create intense or whatever the feeling is they're trying to do it. This was a movie that I noticed it in a good way, where I was like, holy cow, this is really like, this is going to hit this crescendo of like, what the hell's about to happen type stuff.
If you watch some movies from the 40s, late 30s through the mid 50s, sometimes you'll see Mr. Microphone hanging down over right at the very top of the screen. And that's where it all comes from. So can you imagine cutting this film?
Oh my God.
Was that montage scene, like where they go through whatever it is, 16 years of his life in 2.5 minutes?
Dude, that was so fast. Just boom, 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 boom,
and
boom.
it was so well done. And basically, it's his first wife. It's he and his first wife sitting at the breakfast table, just having conversation, and it just naturally cuts, and you can slowly tell the passage of time. Changes in the background, or changes in his makeup.
Yeah, and the makeup was phenomenal.
Yep.
And it was, and it went by, and that was again one of those things I had forgotten from the first watch, and it was like, wow, that is some real creative filmmaking, and easy to do today. Back then, much more arduous.
Back then, you were working with the razor blade, baby.
Yeah,
and I believe it was all shot on the same day.
Yes, absolutely.
Wow.
Ken, I wanted to ask you about the acting, because I took a history of film class in college, and some of the especially some of the really early stuff, acting has always come off as very stiff to me with some movies that old. And we mentioned at the very beginning that a lot of the people in this were not film actors before. I thought that the acting in this was really good. It was not stiff. How much of that was just like a perfect storm of the people that were a part of this movie versus how much of it was the actual types of people that Orson Welles brought to this picture?
Those two things, and then I would add a third thing.
Okay.
The third thing was Orson Welles had complete creative control, which was absolutely unheard of in 1941. Okay? He had complete creative control. So nobody from the studio was in there trying to tell people how to act. So he let his people do, and he sort of set the tone himself. Astoundingly, this is his first movie.
Crazy.
Yes.
Crazy.
Insane, isn't it?
It is, man.
Your first movie is the greatest movie of all time.
Well, and not only is it
pressure on you, huh?
Not only is it the greatest, that's incredible, but all the things that he had decided to try and do,
and he pulled it off
for the first time in his first movie, and was like, what the hell? Let's do them all at once and see what happens. And it turned out to be the greatest thing ever. It's just incredible cojones on that guy to just be like, let's see what the hell happens. Let's do it.
Well, he's a very, very good actor.
Yeah.
I don't know that he ever quite got credit for what a great actor he was. What's the name of the border? There's a movie where he's the bad guy. It's set on the U.S.-Mexican border, and I'm not going to remember the name of it. So I will consult Mr. Google machine while we're
doing it for you.
Well, I was going to say about the acting, because that's one of the things that usually accompanies old films is, and Josh called it stiff acting. I always think of it as when John Lovitz would play the character on Saturday Night Live and go, I'm an actor, and just overdo it. And that's the thing that kind of turns me off on older films.
Touch of Evil, Kent?
That's it.
Thank you, Michael Severe. Thank you, Michael. Keep going, John. Sorry,
but you don't have that here. It just seems very natural and very well acted, and keeping in mind that Welles is playing a very over the top big personality, but I don't know how everyone else felt. He
had his quiet moments.
It has quiet moments, but you almost are rooting for him, even though he is, he's the head of yellow journalism, and he's the guy that has to have everything his way. But there's a humanity to him that's like, you still want him to succeed. And I think that's part of, the way he portrays this character as something more than just a, big personality, rich guy.
I agree with you, John. And I felt at times bad, like, man, his political posters are badass. And it'd be so cool to have one of those, even as I'm like, I probably shouldn't be rooting for this guy, though, because of who he's trying to replicate.
I 100% agree, too. I've always thought that is an incredible feat for an actor to be able to do. I think of Breaking Bad.
Yeah.
You should not have been rooting for Walter White for most of that entire series, but he was so good at making him a person, not just a horrible drug lord, or even Michael Scott. I hate to compare Citizen Kane to The Office, but Michael Scott is such a douche, but everyone loves him because he's adorable douche. Little it's an incredible thing to be able to do. and then to be directing a groundbreaking film while acting in it at the same time.
And having written it and produced it and oversaw the construction of the sets and oversaw the editing. And, about the only thing that he didn't have his fingers in would be the music, because I don't think he had any skills in that sense. Interestingly enough, Kane is sort of based on 4 people, a couple industrialists of the time, and then sort of a combination of Joseph Pulitzer and William Randolph Hearst. More Hearst than Pulitzer, but Pulitzer was the real yellow journalism guy, so that's part of where it got pulled in. It hit close enough to home that Hearst refused to allow his papers to write anything about it.
And he refused advertising.
And did he? Did he turn down advertising as well?
Hearst papers turned down all advertising because RKO was going to put a big advertising campaign into this, and Hearst shut it all down, which is why this film did not. It opened in a very few theaters, and it never really made any money. It didn't really hit its stride until after it was sold to television in the 50s and kind of got a second life. Otherwise, this thing could have died on the vine because it just didn't get the same kind of, unlike Gone with the Wind or Wizard of Oz, big pictures that everybody had to see. This was not that film in part because Hearst, they tried to have published that would demean Orson Welles for employing foreign people to the film. They wanted to muckrake and kind of use that yellow journalism to try to drive Welles away, and he wouldn't do it. He wouldn't have anything of it. So in a weird way, what he was tried to also destroy him.
And what happened as part of the sort of the finding of Citizen Kane is that a lot of the filmmakers like Jean-Luc Godard, the French New Wave people, discovered the movie, okay? And critics, American critics, when film started to be taken seriously in the early 50s, really, right? Before then, it wasn't, taken quite so seriously, I guess you could say. And it got discovered that way, and people were able to see it on television at first, and then it actually came back into theaters, and it still comes back every now and again. They'll bring a restored version for 3 days or something at the movies. And if they ever do that, it's worth going to see. Imagine now you've seen it on a screen, however big it is that you watch at home. Imagine seeing it, where everything's 12 feet high and 35 feet wide, or whatever those dimensions are.
Yeah, and remember, I picked this movie because there's a movie coming out called Mank pretty soon. It's going to be on Netflix next month. David Fincher is doing it, and so it would not surprise me because it's about this. It would not surprise me if it was back in theaters at some point over the next month.
And
it's going to be 80 years old.
Mank? Is it about Mankiewicz?
Yeah, it's about Mankiewicz. And I guess, the Wikipedia says the story centers on the life of Herman Mankiewicz as he wrote Citizen Kane and the problems that arose with Orson Welles during the production and leading up to the film's release.
And we haven't mentioned that part. It's dual writing credits, but for the longest time, Mankiewicz wasn't going to get writing credit. He was going to be listed, not even listed. He was going to be more considered like a cleanup guy. And he had to fight to get that screen credit for writing this because he was involved in it a lot more than he had equal work ability into it as Wells did, but he almost didn't get credit for it.
And I will deep dark Hollywood secrets that goes on to today, right? Yeah. Script doctors, they're called, and they'll get called in. Sometimes they'll get credit, sometimes they won't. I know, for example, I will not name the movies, but I know that Alexander Payne has done that a couple times early in his career, tried to fix up scripts and then have him not even use what he used, but what he did. But that Mankiewicz was a script doctor in some sense. And you know, I don't know all the details of it, but can you imagine trying to put this whole thing together in 1940, 1941? World War II is about to start. You know, you've got all the technological limitations. You know, imagine shooting on those. I think, what'd you get, 8 minutes? I believe you could get 8 minutes on a reel of film. So you know, it was really a different, and that also makes it kind of an astounding picture.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. The making of it is probably as interesting as the film itself. When you look at the links, they literally had to cut holes into concrete floors to get the cameras just right, so you can get the upward angle when two characters were having dialogue. They literally cut holes in concrete floors to do that. It's it's an amazement of film technology, and it truly is. And I mean this sincerely. It holds up very well today.
Yeah, I absolutely loved it. I really did. I can't wait to watch it again. Yeah.
And now that you've seen it and you know some of these things, look in other pictures. People steal from that movie to this day.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
I mean, to this day, you'll see the camera angle like this, or you'll see the deep focus scene and the overlapping dialogue, and you can kind of hear part of it and really hear part of it good. All of those things are commonplace. We don't even think about them now, but they get copped from Citizen Kane.
Yeah.
Well, there it is, Citizen Kane. It is streaming
fun.
right now on HBO Max if you want to see it, and it's well worth it. And like I said, 2 hours, it flew by. I was stunned. I was like, "What? This is over already?" And it was that good. It really was.
The other great thing is that you know that it's over, right? This was a posthumous story, right? It all took place after he died, so you had to know where it was going to come to an end, right? But you didn't know how it was going to get there. That is another achievement in the storytelling, so to speak.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's Citizen Kane. Who's
I think it's your turn.
I think so too.
Here I am. I'm on the spot here. Well, you know what, Josh?
Uh-oh.
What's that?
You know what?
What?
You mentioned it. You mentioned it earlier. And today, November the 12th, is the 65th anniversary of the Enchantment Under the Sea dance.
Uh-huh.
So I think maybe we need to go back to the future next week.
Oh, I love it.
Maybe we need to go back to the future.
I love it.
Did you know that, Kent? Today, according to the film timeline, would be the 65 years ago, November the 12th, 1955, when Marty McFly hooked his parents up.
All right.
So,
I did not know that.
I believe it is streaming on Netflix.
I just found it. It is indeed on Netflix. Awesome.
So let's go back to the future, shall we?
That sounds fun.
That's one entertaining little picture.
Oh man, it is so good.
It of all the films I remember, and we went to, I mean, growing up a kid in the 80s, when you went to movies a lot, the great summer movies that we had, that one is, if that's not number one on the list, it's darn near close. It's still my favorite to this day. All right, Ken, thanks for being flexible with us. Thanks a lot for joining us, and we'll talk to you next week.
Talk to you next week, guys. And thanks for accommodating my day.
Absolutely.
Oh, wait a minute. Hold on.
Oh, yeah.
We do have a game on Saturday.
We do.
Do you have a prediction yet? Are we going to jump the paper? Because you usually put it in the paper.
Nope, you're not going to jump anything. I'm going to go Penn State 28, Nebraska 17. See what I did there?
And Evil Kent?
I could see 52-38 or something like that. Probably Nebraska.
Wow, they get their offense back on track.
I would be stunned if they together score 52.
Yeah, I think I would
Here's
be
a
too.
question. Will Nebraska have 52 combined points through 3 games after Saturday?
Well, they need
Woo!
20. They need 22 this week.
Yeah, it's going to get
Your
close.
prediction comes up short.
Oh man. Oh man.
Whoops.
Who's the real evil Kent here? Am I right? All right, Kent. See you next Friday.
Later, Kent.
Yeah.
There he is, Kent Wolgamott, Lincoln Journal-Star. Yes, we're going to go back to the future next week.
Awesome. That's nice. Do a classic, old school, black and white 1941 movie, and then just a really fun popcorn flick from the 80s. I am so in. This is gonna be fun.
All right, that's the Movie Club. We will take a break because Bruce Feldman's coming up in about 10 minutes. So we're going to talk some college football here on 1620 The Zone.